for multiple people. And if you want to like do a show of hands, or just in the chat or anything, like, do you cook more for yourself, or is it you and others, whether it's children, spouse, family members, whatnot, if you're comfortable sharing? Me and partner, awesome, just for you. Cool. So I'll address kind of both situations, myself and my mom. Awesome. Because whenever we are cooking for multiple people, not everybody necessarily will have the same flavor preferences. And so whenever we're cooking just for ourselves, that's kind of one thing. And then cooking for us and others can sometimes change that dynamic and how maybe we're thinking about the food that we're preparing. So a big part too in today is getting a very satisfying meal out of the portion of food that we can eat. And a big way to do that is with flavor and texture. So I think a lot of people very easily think of the flavor part, but the texture part, you may or may not take kind of for granted as you're eating food. So this is a great opportunity if you want to journal here some of your favorite flavors. The basic 5 are sweet, salty, sour, bitter, and umami. What is umami? So that is savoriness. It really kind of scientifically, it's the presence of glutamates. It's that flavor, it's a glutamate structure. But it's that like savoriness flavor. Foods that display umami are like mushrooms and meats, and a lot of fermented foods. So sometimes people feel like umami can be a little bit hard to pick out, but just think, savory, and that's where your umami fits. And those 5 flavors we typically feel on our tongue, and we taste them on our tongue. Now we also have aromas that we get from food, and then in the back of the nose and like top of the throat, there's a third sensory place where we get flavor from. And that picks up more of this second column of flavors, like fruity and herbaceous, floral, spicy, you'll feel on your tongue, but there are flavors associated with peppers that you'll feel more towards the back of your throat. And you might also feel some of that spice through your throat. And then earthy and rich and sulfuric. And now sulfuric, you might say, is that really what I want in my food? You might hear it with wine tasting a little bit more often, but like hard-boiled eggs, I would consider those sulfuric. So it is a flavor that may or may not be present in most of your foods if you don't like it as much. But sulfuric and minerality and those types of flavors, we can still be aware of. And maybe sometimes you like them if they're paired with something else. You might find that. So I'm going to give you about a minute here to journal. Think about how many flavors, and you can be as specific or as vague as you want. You can even say like individual ingredients, but what really like lights you up whenever you think about that flavor? And are there any flavors that you like to have together? Like, are you a sweet and spicy together type of person? And then are there any flavors that maybe you don't know if you like them or not? And you can put a little question mark, and that's an opportunity for discovery as you taste more food. So you can even go through herbs like cilantro, basil, thyme, saffron, sage, rosemary. Do any of those kind of bring anything up to you? You can think of specific sauces like barbecue sauce, soy sauce, tamari, vinaigrettes. And if it is a vinaigrette, do you like a white balsamic vinaigrette or a fruitier vinaigrette? Are there any of these flavors that you like in savory foods specifically and in sweet foods specifically? Like for floral, for example, maybe the idea of a lemon lavender chicken breast with white wine sauce just sounds horrible to you. You wouldn't want to taste that. But maybe you like a lemon lavender sorbet. So there could be some flavors that you like in a sweet setting, but not in a savory setting. So yeah, 30-ish more seconds because I talked through a lot of that. Time for you to journal and think about what flavors you really enjoy. And then for textures, listed a few examples of textures here: creamy, juicy, tender, crunchy, chewy, soft, crispy, mushy, silky, lumpy, gelatinous, flaky. Some of these you may say, I don't want that associated with my food. Others, like crunchy and crispy, you may say, well, those seem very similar. But for you, what might that mean? Does crunchy more like a crouton and crispy more like a chip? And again, with the sweet and the savory, there could be times whenever you like these textures in savory applications and times when you like them in sweet foods. And then, so yeah, journal and see if any of those textures like really excite you. And then if there are any ingredients that you know you're very particular about the texture of. So like sometimes people will say, well, I don't like mushrooms because of the texture, not because of the flavor. Or an example for me is I don't like baked sweet potatoes, like whenever you bake them as a whole potato and they get mushy. It's just not a pleasant texture for me, but I do love dicing up my sweet potatoes, tossing them in olive oil, seasoning, and roasting them in the oven so that they get a crispy outside and a soft interior. So sweet potato and mushy, like not a fan of, but sweet potato crispy and soft, I am a fan of. So I'll give you another minute or so to journal about some textures that really excite you. And if you can think of any texture pairings or textures unique to ingredients that you can think of, go ahead and write that down too. You can like them. Jeff asked in the chat, can I like them all? You're definitely allowed to like them all. I think it's great to have an open mind about things too. I think sometimes we may have experienced a food cooked in a way that we didn't really like. And so identifying if it was the way it was prepared or if it was the food itself. If it was the way it was prepared, maybe we can prepare it in a new way and enjoy it. But even if you do like everything all of the time, all of them, maybe there's a ranking. Maybe you can highlight like the ones that maybe you feel like you could eat almost every day. And then maybe highlight other ones that you enjoy, but you feel like there's room to grow creatively with. And that way you can kind of focus on, even though you do like them all, but you can give a little bit of focus to certain ones too. But yes, you're allowed to like everything. Cool. So next, we're gonna talk about the protein part of our meal. So our bodies enjoy, okay, so macronutrients are protein, carbohydrates, and fat. And our bodies, whenever we eat the carbohydrates, they break those down quickest for the most readily available energy. And so they'll break down the carbohydrates, use up that energy, and then if there's nothing else, you're going to feel full, feel hungry again quickly. And so protein is a great macronutrient that helps us feel fuller for longer. And so your body uses the most readily available energy, and then it starts breaking down those proteins. And then, so that's going to give you more sustained energy. And then fat is the third macronutrient, and fats are important to help your body absorb all of the nutrients that the other foods have given you. So all three of them like work in conjunction together, but I am highlighting protein here because proteins have 9 essential amino acids that our bodies cannot synthesize. And so we need to get them into our bodies in another way, one of the best ways of eating them. And so I think that whenever we are planning a meal, starting with the protein can be a really focused way. We know, okay, we're going to get those amino acids, and then we can add on the other components of the meal around that protein. But I think it's nice to have one place to start, and I like to do it with the protein. If there are any vegans in the room, you'll notice there are some vegan protein options on the list and some animal proteins on the list. Excuse me. There are more vegan proteins than what are on this list. However, they don't have all 9 essential amino acids in the one item. So for example, if you pair beans and rice together, those in conjunction will have all 9 of those amino acids. But individually, they each only have a few. I forget the exact numbers. I think beans have 6 of them and the rice has 4, and one of them is the same, so it overlaps. But anyway, the point is this list is nice because you know that you're getting all 9 with the one. And yes, it is cool that mushrooms are a protein option. I will say I like pairing mushrooms with other proteins, more like densely, if you think about the texture of it, more like densely packed proteins too. But mushrooms do have all 9 amino acids present. So it's pretty cool. Personally, I do like mushrooms, and I know that everybody has their own opinions on textures and flavors and everything. But I think that mushrooms can be a fun way to kind of like switch up the routine a little bit. So we've got our flavors that we like, we've got our textures that we like. If you want to write down some of your favorite proteins to cook, some of these could be what you're most familiar with cooking. Some of them could be, your favorite flavors or the ones that are the most readily accessible to you. And then if there's 1 or 2 on the list that really excite you of like, ooh, you know what, I want to try doing more with this, then write that down too. And get as specific with this as you'd like to. I have fish on here, but for you, do you enjoy salmon or cod, halibut, shrimp? I mean, I can't have lobster for dinner every night, but if that's something you're into, then hey, go for it. Maybe not every night, but within each of these groups, think about specifically which proteins really excite you and can you see yourself having in your house a lot. And then the last question, are you inspired by a global cuisine? So whether you at this point love to cook it yourself, or even if maybe it's one of your favorite like order out go-tos or like treating yourself at a restaurant, if you really enjoy eating that out, even maybe you can start making some of those dishes at home too. So if there are any global cuisines that really speak to you, that you find the flavors really interesting and that you enjoy eating, write those down too. And what we're really creating here is like an idea bank. So if you feel stuck in saying, I'm not really sure what to make for dinner or lunch, or whatever meal it may be, you can come here and look at, okay, I know what my favorites are. So let me start with this, because it's always so much easier to start with something a little bit planned out than just looking at a blank page. So we've got our global cuisine preferences down. And now I'm going to show you this chart of global spice inspiration. Now, this is very open, right? There are so many countries and regions represented within each of these that the food is specific within each region. And so you can get super duper specific and really go on a long journey of discovery throughout each of these regions and throughout which ingredients and herbs and spices might be used in certain areas. But I put them in like bigger, more vague groups so that we have something to start with and to help get you a little bit more familiar with different spices from a larger kind of like zoomed out viewpoint. So maybe you have some of these herbs or spices in your pantry and you've looked at it before and said, I'm not quite sure how to use this or not. So hopefully this chart can give you some ideas of where to search a little bit deeper with what kinds of foods might I want to make with these spices. So first, like Central and South America use a lot of chili powder, cilantro, and coriander. And so coriander is the dried seed from cilantro. So cilantro are the green leaves. Coriander comes from the seed, and then a lot of times they'll ground that, so you'll find ground coriander. So same plant, but there's some flavor difference there between like the leaf and the seed. All right, cayenne epazote is an herb. It's leafy, but it's not as leafy as like parsley is. It's used a lot, especially in cooking beans. Oregano, paprika, and then parsley, white and black pepper, and garlic are used like pretty much all over the world in all kinds of cuisine. So you'll see those listed almost everywhere. A lot of your like seasoning blends that you might have most likely also have garlic, white pepper, sometimes black pepper, sometimes not black pepper, parsley, and onion too, a lot of times dried onion in them. White pepper, it's hard to find by itself in the grocery store. So if you go to the spice section and you're like, I can't find white pepper, I don't know. It's hard to find, but it is in a lot of blends already. And what we typically see, for like at home cooking is black pepper to add as a seasoning there. All right, cool. So European food, French cooking, classic French cooking has like built the curriculum for a lot of culinary education. And it's like the French cooking itself, I feel like you see in a lot of places here in America. And so a lot of these spices are inspired by French cuisine, but I'll let you know when we kind of move a little bit further east to hit a little bit more Germanic. As with South America and Central America, of course, European cuisine has a lot of variation within it too. And Jeff asked, what is the difference between white and black pepper flavor-wise? So white pepper is a little bit more delicate than black pepper is. Black pepper has been fermented and then dried out and then crushed to be the black pepper that like we see on the table. So it kind of has like a sharp note to it, and the white pepper doesn't have that sharp note. It just kind of has like it gives like a warming, well-rounded flavor profile to those seasoning blends that you see them in. If you want any more details, ask me in the chat if you need additional clarification on that. So European spices, we've got the garlic and the white and black pepper again, and parsley. Bay leaf, you see that a lot in like as a flavoring in stocks and pickling juices and things like that. Marjoram, rosemary, sage, thyme, tarragon. And then as we move a little further east into more like Germanic countries, Eastern Europe, you'll see more caraway seed and allspice being used. And if we move down south to Mediterranean, maybe like Northern African cooking, you see a lot of oregano and basil, fennel, rosemary, coriander again, garlic and pepper, some lavender, mint. Mint is especially popular in Greek cooking, parsley, turmeric, and sage. And then if we look at Africa, but we go more like sub-Saharan Africa and south, we're going to see more like cardamom and cinnamon, ginger, bay leaves again, sesame seeds, cumin, fenugreek, which if you aren't familiar with fenugreek, before it's cooked, it's very bitter. And then once it's cooked, it like that bitterness gets a lot more mild. And it has like a nutty, sweet, almost like burnt maple syrup sort of flavor to it. It's not exactly like burnt maple syrup, but it's one of those things that doesn't have like a one-for-one substitute for the flavor. So it's kind of that like sweet sweeter, roastier, nutty flavor. We've got allspice, and then za'atar is a seasoning blend, and it contains sumac in it. So I wanted to list za'atar out because I have seen that in a lot of grocery stores in the seasoning blends aisle. And sumac is one of the main like flavoring ingredients in the za'atar blend. So then going more towards like Indian region, we're going to see curry powder, cumin, ginger, mint, saffron, cardamom, nutmeg, cinnamon, coriander, and cloves. A lot of Indian food is very aromatic, and there is a lot of flavor, and especially like flavor from spices in Indian cooking. And then Southeast Asia, we've got lemongrass, cilantro, star anise, Szechuan peppercorns, ginger, Thai basil, and there are a few different types of Thai basil. So there's like a Thai purple basil and a Thai lemon basil, I believe some others too. And then galangal root, it kind of looks like ginger root, but it doesn't have the same flavor. Turmeric, and then tamarind. You'll also see like soy sauce and tamari fish sauce as major flavoring components. And then back up, because I forgot to mention this, up with the European cooking, but European, you'll see a lot of like wine or brandy, vinegars, like balsamic vinegars, red wine vinegars, sort of flavoring elements also. So I didn't write those down since they aren't spices or herbs, but yes, they tend to cook with a lot more wine in Europe than in a lot of other parts of the world. So, okay, if we go back to, I kind of went down the rabbit hole with spices, but I think that they're really fun to talk about. And being able to go in your pantry and look at what you have and pull and from what you have to say like, ooh, I feel confident in flavoring this chicken breast to be a more Southeastern Asian flavor profile to it, then I think it can just help you have some more fun and like feel like you know what you're doing in the kitchen and like feel really empowered. So that's why I went so far down this rabbit hole. But we've got some of our favorite flavors and textures, proteins, and then if we have a global cuisine, and maybe we're even way more specific than what I've gotten here, then if you aren't already sure, like if you don't already have a recipe on hand with what you're going to make, now you have a lot of the pieces that you need that you can go to your favorite search engine, whether it be like Pinterest or YouTube, Google, wherever you like to go, and type in those keywords and see what comes up and see what speaks to you. Now, if you are very familiar with cooking and you feel like you don't need to like go searching for recipes, now is the time where I recommend you go and you see what sort of leftover vegetables might you have in the fridge that might be going bad soon. That way you can use them up before they go bad. If there's anything else in the pantry or freezer that you want to use up. Reducing food waste is so important to me. So this is a great opportunity to try and cook and eat up any of those things before they go bad. And then you can also look at what might be super delicious right now seasonally that maybe isn't always. Like take advantage of the exciting and usually much more like vibrant flavors of things that are being grown and harvested, you know, right now this season. It's great that we have such a globally connected food chain that we can still get a lot of food throughout the year, a lot of different variety in food throughout the year. But whenever you can like harvest it and eat it really quickly because maybe it was grown right, you know, within 30 minutes or an hour where you live, those flavors, like there's just something extra to those flavors. And I believe the more flavor we can get into our food, the more exciting it's going to be, and then the more satisfied we're going to feel, not just like physically, but like kind of like that like emotional psychological part of eating too. Let's see, Holly says my mom is so good at using random spice in meals. That's awesome. Yes, I think it's so much fun to play around with. And once you like feel comfortable with what you know goes together, you can have so much fun. And then I'm a chicken. Does that mean you're like too scared to play around with spices? Or either that, or maybe you love cooking chicken, in which case chicken takes on a lot of different flavors really well. So you're in a good spot with that too. Alrighty, so let's talk about, okay, so chicken being a little bit too scared to mess up the food. I understand the fear of, you're working hard on something and you don't want the flavors to be something that like your palate's going to say like, oh, no, thank you. But I'm hoping that with our inventory of the flavors that you do like, you can kind of use that as your compass, so you know what your palate is really going to gravitate towards. And then you can even, Google specific ingredients too, and you can say, does soy sauce go well with cumin, for example, and see what else is out there. And maybe that'll give you that extra boost of confidence to try it out and see what your palate likes. Alrighty, so we've got our meal ideas. So let's talk about finishing the meal. Now, if we are cooking for others along with ourselves, we probably don't want to cook different meals for every single person in the household, right? Ideally, we would all like to be eating pretty much the same food. So I'm going to give you a couple ideas where you can take that meal that you might be cooking for several people, and then personalize your portion so that you're getting the most out of it. So when we write, as chefs, when we write recipes, we're thinking about a full plate of food, and there's like a psychology that we implement in flavor and texture. So we want a person who's eating to enjoy that plate of food and not be overwhelmed in the first 3 bites, right? We don't want there to be so much flavor that 3 bites that somebody's like, oh my gosh, my palate is exhausted. I feel like I'm not going to be able to taste anything else. We want people's appetite to continue throughout the plates, and then as you're coming to the end of the plate, then you're feeling satisfied, that satisfaction. Now, when we're talking about like a 1/4 cup of food versus a plate, now we can put a lot more flavor into that 1/4 cup of food than we can on the plate, because we don't have to worry about getting our socks knocked off so early on that we don't get to enjoy the rest of it. So these ideas really capitalize on that idea of, all right, we don't have a full plate of food to eat, so let's get as much flavor and as much excitement in that 1/4 cup that we can. So one of the great ways that you can cook a meal but then take your portion and add something extra is adding a sauce. And so you can look at some of your favorite flavors that you wrote down, and identify sauces that have a strong characteristic of that flavor. And so maybe you kind of keep a library of 6 or 7 sauces on hand that you really enjoy the flavors of. Depending on the type of food you're cooking, you can choose the sauce that's going to go well with that and add. Maybe you've already added some to the rest of the food you're cooking, but you can add even more to yours. And then if you want, you can even add a protein powder into that sauce so that you're getting even a little bit extra protein in there too. Now, protein powders, I don't know how many each of you have tried and what your preferences are. There are some that I really don't like the texture or the flavors of them. I'm more of like a pea protein. That's one that I do like the texture of that better. But I think that mixing the protein powder into a sauce, it kind of hides some of those flavors and textures that you might not be as much of a fan of. If adding in the protein powder makes the sauce a little bit too thick, you can easily thin it out with a little bit of water too. So yeah, mix that protein powder into the sauce if you're into that, and add that to your meal to give you a little extra punch of flavor. And then microgreens, also like sprouts, little bean sprouts, corn shoots, or microgreens of like spinach or other little greens. Those are a great source of flavor and micronutrients. And so microgreens are like the first little younglings of vegetables. And so you think about all of the nutrients that a vegetable has in it. Well, those are pretty concentrated into that tiny little baby sprout. So whenever you add those microgreens on top of your food, you're getting a lot of micronutrients per little leaf, which is awesome. And then the flavors of microgreens are so fun because a lot of times you can tell what that vegetable is going to be when it grows up, but it's a more delicate flavor of it. So if you are somebody who like loves certain flavors of vegetables, but you feel like I'm not able to like eat enough in a day to really satisfy what I want, consider microgreens, because sometimes you can get a good punch of vegetable flavor without using up like a lot of area, like volume of vegetable. Microgreens, so you can find that a lot of times you can find them at like Kroger's and King Supers is the Colorado version of Kroger, Sprouts, Whole Foods, those kinds of places. A lot of farmers markets will have at least one, if not a couple, microgreens producers. You can pretty easily, if you like gardening, you can pretty easily grow these at home because you're pretty much just waiting for those seeds to sprout and peek up out of the soil. You don't even have to grow them outside. You can plant them inside in a pot or kind of like those old timey like flower boxes for like windowsills. Just put those by a brighter window and you might even be able to grow your own microgreens. But a lot of times you'll see them close to where like they keep herbs at grocery stores, and they're in these square plastic containers. Cool. Oh, and I have pictures of microgreens that I totally forgot to throw up there. So this is kind of what they look like. The bottom picture has some bean sprouts in there too. And then depending on which one, so the bean sprouts, I find sometimes they have a little bit more texture to them where they aren't quite as tender as like the microgreens are. And they have an interesting like juiciness whenever you bite through the stems too. So I talked about like the micronutrient and the flavor, but sometimes you can get some fun texture stuff, especially with the bean sprouts. Cool. And then the last point is to have fun with the presentation. So we eat with our eyes first, like a phrase that you might hear from time to time. And kind of some of this like satisfaction that you get from your food can start as soon as you see your food. So you may have seen over the last like 5 to 8 years or so in like fancy restaurants, they'll use a ring cutter, kind of like a cookie cutter, and they'll put the food into the cutter and then lift it off. And so it's this like perfect cylinder on your plate. And so it looks upscale and fancy and ooh and ah as it comes to your table. And you can do that at home. If you have a cookie cutter, and you could use any like shaped cookie cutter if you want. Maybe you want to use a little heart to show yourself some love, or maybe you're happy with the round, or if you have a favorite sport like football and you want to do football shape, I don't know, but like, have fun with it. You can like shape your food in that cutter and then take the cutter off, and it really doesn't take that much longer. But as you sit down to enjoy that meal, I think it'll make you smile a little bit. Also, you can draw a smiley face on your plate with stuff. And also, I think always like having vibrant colors, a variety of colors can, make you a little bit happier as you sit down. So you're already, even before you've taken a bite of food, you're already in this awesome energy and excited about it. All right, so we've eaten. Now, what are we going to do with our leftovers? Especially for those of you who are only cooking for yourself. A lot of recipes out there make a pretty big amount of food. And so what do we do with all of those leftovers? And like I said before, food waste is something that I am very passionate about, doing everything I can to reduce what we waste at home. And so whenever we have those excess leftovers, each of us, I think, are kind of different about if we're excited about eating that again. Some of us say, cool, I don't need to cook for 5 days. I'm going to eat this like 10 meals straight. I'm going to like it. Others of us might say, okay, I can eat this like twice in a row, and then I don't want to see it again for a while. And so understanding kind of where you fall, I guess on that like spectrum. And are you somebody who really enjoys eating leftovers time and time again? Or do you prefer to just eat it once and then not think about it for a while? Just be honest with yourself about what you can do with leftovers. Don't try to be a hero and eat everything all the time. Go ahead and freeze it. There's nothing wrong with popping that food in the freezer. Just really like think about realistically, what can I eat? What can I not eat? And what I can't eat, freeze it. Maybe you can share it with a neighbor or a friend. And then whenever you do freeze those items, be sure to label it, because it's very easy to forget exactly what you put in the freezer when. So put exactly what is in the container, the date that you cooked it, and then if you were eating it and you thought, ooh, this might be really awesome paired with another ingredient or with extra of this sauce or something else, you can, if like you came up with an idea of, ooh, this would be really good, changed a little bit, you can write that on the label too. That way it's a nice reminder whenever you go to get that food out of the freezer, you like have a plan of attack right in front of you. And then whenever you are packing away your meal leftovers, go ahead and pack them in portions of your like ideal size portion. My cat wanted to come say hi. So this just makes it easier whenever you are thawing the food, that you don't have to thaw this whole big amount and then just get one portion and then put the rest of it away, because the more we freeze and thaw, the more the texture of our food will change. And so when we do individual portion sizes, then we can just grab that one and heat it up and we're ready to go. With that texture change that can happen in the freezer. So that's another reason why it's good to inventory what kind of textures we like. If we really like crunchy things, it can be difficult to get something out of the freezer and reheat it and it still be crunchy. If you reheat it in the toaster oven instead of the microwave, it can crisp up those edges some, depending on what the food is. But if you're someone who like really looks for crunchiness and a satisfying meal is going to have at least one crunchy element to it, then you may want to store components of your meal separately. So if that crunchy element can be kept at ambient temperature and away from moisture, then it can stay crunchy. And whenever you reheat the item, you can just add that on top. So consider that whenever you're saving stuff also, is like there could be texture changes. The more moisture that something is close to, the more it's going to absorb that and get like softer and mushier through thawing. So keep that in mind and understand your preferences with that. And then my last tip for meal leftovers is to keep a list of those leftover meals, because it's easy to forget exactly what we have. And instead of going to the fridge and freezer each time, you can put it on a list. So these are like dry erase sticky maps. And they're super cool because you can stick them right to your refrigerator if you want to. If you don't want to do that, you could put like a magnet on here and magnet it right on there on your refrigerator or freezer. You could put it on the back of your pantry door, or if you have a spot where you always meal plan, you could do that. If you have a family calendar, maybe you write the list of meals in pencil on the family calendar, and when it's eaten up, you can erase it. So somewhere where it's going to be really convenient for you to go and look at and keep track of. Sometimes, if we just if we're cooking a few things and we know that there's going to be a lot of leftovers, then we think we're going to remember it. And next thing we know, we have like 8 different meals in there. And we might think, oh, I have nothing to eat. But if we have this list in front of us, then it's a very like low effort, low energy way of seeing what we already have available. So those are some good ideas for saving your leftover meals. But a lot of times we'll also have leftover ingredients, especially if we can find a recipe online, but cut down the batch size to a relatively small amount. Well, we might only be using like half of a bell pepper or a quarter of a chicken breast or something like that in order to make it. And so what do we do with the rest of it? So I have some ideas for how to save those leftover ingredients so that you don't have to like watch them get wilty or moldy and slimy and gross and then throw them away, but you can use them and like get the most out of your money. So for meat, I recommend buying as small of portions as you can that fit your recipe's needs. So like, for example, ground beef, a lot of times the butcher counter at grocery stores, they'll have pounds of ground beef, and you can ask them for like 2 ounces of it, and they'll section that off and pack that up for you. So if you don't want to buy a full pound of ground beef, you might be able to go up to the butcher counter and get a small amount. If you do bring home that full pack, then again, I recommend that you freeze that and save that in portions of what you will actually be using at one time. So instead of saving the whole brick together, section it off and then store those individually. That way you can thaw each portion of meat in it like just by itself. With chicken, instead of buying breasts, I recommend you do like the tenderloins. They're like thinner and smaller, so they're going to thaw quicker, which is nice. And then thaw quicker and cook quicker. And then you can freeze each one of those separately and just thaw the 1 or maybe 2 if you need to cook that specific meal. Whenever you freeze meat, please make sure it's completely thawed before you start cooking it. Number 1 reason is because cooking frozen meat is the big risk for foodborne illness. With chicken, we want to get it up to 165 degrees. Ground beef, we're looking at 150 to 155. And cooking that from frozen is going to take longer to get up to that safe internal temperature that's going to kill that bacteria. That's going to take longer than if we're cooking it from thawed. So please make sure that your meat is completely thawed before cooking it for your safety. And then if you think about like a piece of chicken, by the time the center of that is hot enough, the outside is going to get so dry and tough and rubbery. So like the texture isn't going to be as good. And there's that risk for foodborne illness. So when possible, pull it out and put it in the fridge the day before. That way it has plenty of time to thaw. And when you're ready to cook, your meat is ready for you. And then if you have leftover vegetables, you can pickle those. And I also like taking these pickled vegetables later and dicing them up, and then you can add that on top, like as a flavorful garnish onto your meals. So cucumbers, of course, are a great vegetable to pickle, but I also really like doing carrots and green beans, cauliflower, red onion. I've done peppers, like bell peppers before, and those are delicious. I really encourage you to experiment with some of your favorite vegetables and see if they are delicious pickled, because I have yet to find anything that isn't. And pickling, like the juice for pickling, the pickling brine, it's simple to make. It is equal parts vinegar and water, and you can use like distilled white vinegar, or you can use apple cider vinegar. And then you do add a lot of salt. So it is 1 ounce of salt per pound of water, which is the same ratio as 1 tablespoon of salt to 1 cup of water. and you heat that up so that you dissolve the salt, and then you add whatever herbs and spices you like into it, and then that is your pickling brine. And it will look like a lot of salt, but don't worry, because the vegetables don't absorb every ounce of that salt. So the brine has to be really salty and the vinegar and acidity, so that it preserves your vegetables. So don't be scared if you try it and you're like, this can't be the right amount of salt. It is, but it's fine. It's good. It's all good. Alrighty. If there's anything that you don't really want to pickle, maybe you can ferment it. You can experiment with fermenting. So like kimchi, there's some slaws, sauerkraut are all examples of fermented foods. So those can also be a really great flavor addition. And then you can slice things thinly and dehydrate them into chips. So whenever you take that moisture away, it extends the shelf life. Whether it's like an apple, again, like carrots are great as chips too. That can be a good way to keep your veggies and just eat them later. And then lastly, for fruits, if you don't want to put them in the freezer, or maybe your freezer is already full, you can cook them down into a jam or a jelly. And similarly to what we were talking about with adding a sauce to your meals, you could use jam or jelly in a similar way, to where if you're having a dessert, or maybe you even have like a yogurt parfait or something like that, a scoop of jam or jelly in something like that can be really delicious and add some good like concentrated fruit flavor. And then, okay, I thought that was it, but cool. So do you all have any questions for me at this point? Is there anything that you need clarity on? Any specific cooking questions that you have, or anything like that? I would love to hear from you, so that I know how I can better support you.
I have one.
Okay.
Mine is I'm really not a good cook. So I see this is a question. I see a lot of people using citrus in their meals. And when is a good time to actually, when does citrus kick in? I see people, you squeeze it on stuff. Okay, now I don't know if I'm squeezing it on my, my chocolate ice cream or my fish. So when's a good time for citrus use?
Yes, it's a great question. So do you like sour, tangier flavors?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Then the juice is going to be a really good option for you.
Right.
The juice of the citrus is going to have a lot more tanginess to it than the zest will. So for you, for juice, you can use it at the end of cooking for proteins like white fish and chicken, and pork.
Okay.
Speaking very generally. As you plate it up, you can add an extra, like you said, like a squeeze of lemon juice or lime juice. That's going to give it that zesty or that tangy, like sour note to it also. I would not, okay, personally, I don't like the combination of like really cheesy flavors and citrus. So if you have like a chicken breast with cheese melted on top, I wouldn't add citrus in that scenario. If you are looking for some sourness, I might go with like a vinegar. A red wine vinegar might be a good option, or a balsamic vinegar might be a good option for that. So I like lemon and lime. I do think pair really well with a lot of different foods, but especially lemon on white fish is kind of a classic. And then lime on, like if you're doing like a carnitas style pork, can be really delicious. And then if you go like earlier in the cooking journey, citrus juice is also really delicious in marinades. So if you are marinating your meat, part of that marinade can be lemon juice or lime juice or orange juice, especially like fresh squeezed orange juice. And with steak, it's sort of like a carne asada style marinade. So good, so good. So whenever you add the citrus to the marinade, that acid is breaking down some of the tougher tendons in the meat. And then whenever you go to cook it, you're not going to get as much of that sour flavor. You're really going to get the like actual lemon essence flavor more than you will the sour.
Cool.
And then for the zest of citrus, that's something that you can also add right at the end. If you don't really like the sour, but you do like the actual citrus flavor, that's where zest can come in well. That's probably where I would like most often use it, but in recipes, you might see it if you're making a sauce, you might see it in the earlier stages of making that sauce too.
Right. Awesome. Thank you. I'd forgotten about the marinade side of it. I'll have to start doing that.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And marinating is interesting. So the first 30 minutes of the marinade is doing most of the work. And so if you have time to marinate your meat for at least 30 minutes, then I say go ahead and do it. Sometimes people will say like, well, I only have an hour, so I don't know if I should. 30 minutes is when you're getting the most flavor, and that the acid is breaking down those tendons. And then the tougher your meat, the more important it might be to marinate it. But you can marinate chicken. Chicken isn't a tough meat, but you can still marinate it for flavor too. Just don't do it for long, like longer than 8 hours, and your meat might get mushy. So yeah, don't just let it sit there for days.
Good to know. Good to know.
Yep.
I'm good if I can get 10 minutes of marinade because I always forget about it. So,
Okay.
but thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm a stickler for the hour, and we're at the hour. But so I see some people jumped off. Holly or any questions?
No, but thank you so much. This was awesome.
I'm so glad that you enjoyed.